The whole picture. Anatomy and physiology is the study of the structure of the human body and how it works. Our bodies are microscopic communities of cells that are specialized to take on specific and necessary responsibilities. Together they maintain an environment within the body in which they can all live. Cells aggregate and interact to form tissues, which in turn layer and fold and intertwine to form organs, which in turn connect into organ systems. Learning anatomy and physiology requires familiarity with the language used to describe structures and functions. Mastering the principles of anatomy and physiology not only will give you a new appreciation for your own bodies, including talents, strengths, and health, but also will provide a foundation for you to help your future patients, for those of you going into healthcare. Page 10. Understanding words. Append dash, to hang something, appendicular pertaining to the upper limbs and lower limbs. Cardi dash, heart, pericardium membrane that surrounds the heart. Cerebra dash, brain, cerebrum largest part of the brain. Cran dash, helmet, cranial pertaining to the part of the skull that surrounds the brain. Dors dash, back, dorsal position toward the back of the body. Homeo dash, same, homeostasis maintenance of a stable internal environment. Logi, the study of, physiology study of body functions. Meta dash, change, metabolism chemical changes in the body. Nas dash, nose, nasal pertaining to the nose. Orb dash, circle, orbital pertaining to the portion of the skull that encircles an eye. Parietal dash, wall, parietal membrane that lines the wall of a cavity. Pelv dash, basin, pelvic cavity basin-shaped cavity enclosed by the pelvic bones. Peri dash, around, pericardial membrane that surrounds the heart. Pleur dash, rib, pleural membrane that encloses the lungs within the rib cage. Stasis, standing still, homeostasis maintenance of a stable internal environment. Super dash, above, superior referring to a body part located above another. Tomy, cutting, anatomy study of structure, which often involves cutting or removing body parts. 1.1 Origins of medical science. Learn. Identify some of the early discoveries that lead to our current understanding of the human body. Medicine and the study of the human body together have a long and intimate history. Figure 1.1. Serious thoughts of the structure and function of the human body more than likely arose from observations of a malfunction. That is, little attention was needed until something went wrong, such as a broken bone or even a general condition of not feeling well. Healers, the first physicians, originally relied on superstition and a certain sense of magic to provide health care. This eventually evolved into a system where they would seek causes for effects, what we now call symptoms, and then provide remedies. The discovery that certain herbs and other naturally occurring chemicals could alleviate ailments such as coughs, headaches, and fevers was the beginning of medicine and pharmacology. People began asking more questions and seeking answers, setting the stage for the development of modern medical science. Techniques for making accurate observations and performing careful experiments evolved, allowing knowledge of the human body to expand rapidly. This new knowledge of the structure and function of the human body required a new, specialized language. Early medical providers devised many terms to name body parts, describe the locations of the parts, and explain their functions. These terms, most of which originated from Greek and Latin, formed the basis for the language of anatomy and physiology. A list of some of the modern medical and applied sciences appears in section 1.8, Anatomical Terminology. Study of corpses was forbidden in Europe during the Middle Ages, but dissection of dead bodies became a key part of medical education in the 20th century. Today, cadaver dissection remains an important method to learn how the body functions and malfunctions, and autopsies are commonly depicted on television crime dramas. However, the traditional gross anatomy course in medical schools is sometimes supplemented with learning from body parts already dissected by instructors, in contrast to students doing this, as well as with computerized scans of cadavers, such as the Visible Human Project from the National Library of Medicine and Anatomy and Physiology revealed available with this textbook. Page 11. Much of what we know about the human body is based on the scientific method, an approach to investigating the natural world. The scientific method consists of making observations, asking questions, and then formulating a hypothesis, an attempt to answer the questions based upon previous knowledge. The next step is to test the hypothesis through experimentation or further observations. The results of the test will either support or reject your hypothesis. This method is described in greater detail in Appendix A, Scientific Method, but it is likely that aspects of its application are already familiar to you. Imagine that you injure your arm in the region between the elbow and the wrist. Coincidentally, your anatomy instructor has just presented the skeletal system in class the previous week. After observing that your injury is quite painful, you question the source of the pain. You hypothesize that a broken bone is the culprit. You can test this by getting an X-ray, which will support or reject your hypothesis. Rather than giving us all the answers, science eliminates wrong explanations. Our knowledge of the workings of the human body reflects centuries of asking questions, testing, rejecting, and sometimes accepting hypotheses. New technologies provide new views of anatomy and physiology, so that knowledge is always growing. One day you may discover something previously unknown about the human body. Practice 1.1. What factors probably stimulated an early interest in the human body? Answer. Start revealed content. Factors include attempting to understand the causes of various injuries, illnesses, and the loss of function of body parts, and trying to treat these conditions. Revealed content has ended. What types of activities helped promote the development of modern medical science? Answer. Start revealed content. Activities include dissection of cadavers, the production of prosthetic body parts, experimentation to improve medical knowledge and techniques, and the discovery of certain chemicals in nature as treatments for specific conditions. Revealed content has ended. What is the role of a hypothesis in the scientific method? Answer. Start revealed content. The hypothesis is the idea or proposition being evaluated, or tested. It is formulated based on observations, and tested through experiments. Revealed content has ended. Career corner. Emergency medical technician. The driver turns a corner and suddenly swerves as a cat dashes into the road. She slams on the brakes but hits a parked car, banging her head against the steering wheel. Onlookers call 911, and within minutes an ambulance arrives. The driver of the ambulance and another emergency medical technician, EMT, leap out and run over to the accident scene. They open the driver's side door and quickly assess the woman's condition by taking her vital signs. She is bleeding from a laceration on her forehead, and is conscious but confused. The EMTs carefully place a restraint at the back of the woman's neck and move her onto a board, then slide her into the ambulance. While one EMT drives, the other rides in the back with the patient and applies pressure to the cut. At the hospital, the EMTs document the care provided and clean and restock the ambulance. EMTs care for ill or injured people in emergency situations, and transport patients, such as from a hospital to a nursing home. The work is outdoors and indoors and requires quick thinking as well as strength. Requirements vary by state, but all EMTs must be licensed. Basic EMTs take 120 to 150 hours of training. Paramedic EMTs take 1,200 to 1,800 hours of training. Paramedics may give injections, set up intravenous lines, and give more medications than can basic EMTs. 1.2 Anatomy and Physiology. Learn. Explain how anatomy and physiology are related. Two major areas of medical science, anatomy, and physiology, physiology, address how the body maintains life. Anatomy, from the Greek for, a cutting up, examines the structures, or morphology, of body parts, their forms and organization. Physiology, from the Greek for, relationship to nature, considers the functions of body parts, what they do and how they do it. Although anatomists rely more on examination of the body and physiologists more on experimentation, together their efforts have provided a solid foundation for understanding how our bodies work. It is difficult to separate the topics of anatomy and physiology because anatomical structures make possible their functions. Body parts form a well-organized unit, the human organism. Each part contributes to the operation of the unit as a whole. This functional role arises from the way the part is constructed. For example, the arrangement of bones and muscles in the human hand, with its long, jointed fingers, makes grasping possible, figure 1.2a. The heart's powerful muscular walls contract and propel blood out of the chambers and into blood vessels, and heart valves keep blood moving in the proper direction. The shape of the mouth enables it to receive food, and the structure of the ears allows for the capturing of sound waves, figure 1.2b. As ancient as the fields of anatomy and physiology are, we are always learning more. For example, researchers recently used imaging technology to identify a previously unrecognized part of the brain, the planum temporale, which enables people to locate sounds in space. Many discoveries today begin with investigations at the microscopic level, molecules and cells. In this way, researchers discovered that certain cells in the small intestine bear the same types of taste receptor proteins found on the tongue. At both locations, the receptors detect molecules of sugar. The cells in the tongue provide taste sensations, whereas the cells in the intestines help regulate the digestion of sugar. The discovery of the planum temporale is anatomical. The discovery of sugar receptors in the intestine is physiological. Many nuances of physiology are being revealed through the examination of genes that function in particular cell types under particular conditions, sometimes leading to surprising findings. Using such gene expression profiling, for example, researchers discovered that after a spinal cord injury, the damaged tissue releases a flood of proteins previously associated only with skin wounds. This discovery suggests new drug targets. Comparing gene expression profiles can reveal commonalities among pairs of diseases that had not been suspected based on whole body level observations. Page 12. Variation in the human body. If you observe your classmates, you'll notice variations in height, hair texture, and skin color. If you speak with them, you will also hear differences in their voices. Although we are all recognizable as humans, our differences are what makes us individually unique. A journey through the inside of our bodies would also reveal physiological and anatomical variation. The average resting heart rate is about 72 beats per minute in a young adult, with a range of about 60 to 100 that is considered healthy. Blood vessels differ with respect to branching patterns, especially those directly arising from the aorta, figure 1.2c. Some muscles tend to vary in size and shape, and in whether they are present. A muscle in the forearm called palmaris longus is absent in a small percentage of humans, see figure 9.32a. There can even be differences in the skeletal system, which is necessary for support and movement. A tiny bone on the posterior side of the knee joint called the fibula is present in about 40% of the population, figure 1.2d. These are only a few of many possible examples of variation. and unless they are associated with a medical condition, we usually remain unaware of them. Variation in the reproductive organs presents a somewhat more complex scenario than in other structures. Historically, two reproductive categories, sexes, have been recognized, female and male. This works well for over 98% of the human population. However, it is now clear that the variation in the reproductive organs, vagina, ovaries, penis, and testicles, exhibits an anatomical and functional spectrum based upon chromosomal inheritance, gene expression, and hormonal action. We will expand this discussion in chapters 22, 23, and 24. Throughout this book we will primarily examine and discuss the most common of the anatomical and physiological variations. This provides a springboard to discuss variants that are not as common as well as potential pathologies when appropriate. Practice 1.2. What are the differences between anatomy and physiology? Answer. Start revealed content. Anatomy is the study of body structures and relies on examination of those structures. Physiology is the study of the functions of body parts, and relies more on experimentation. Revealed content has ended. Why is it difficult to separate the topics of anatomy and physiology? Answer. Start revealed content. Structure is closely related to function. Body parts are shaped and arranged, anatomy, in such a way that they are able to perform their functions, physiology. Revealed content has ended. List several examples that illustrate how the structure of a body part makes possible its function. Answer. Start revealed content. The arrangement of bones and muscles in the hand allow grasping, the heart's muscular walls pump blood, and heart valves keep blood flowing in the proper direction, the mouth is shaped to receive food and the shapes of the teeth allow them to break down food into pieces, the tongue mixes food with saliva and prepares food particles for swallowing. Revealed content has ended. How are anatomy and physiology both old and new fields? Answer. Start revealed content. The fields of anatomy and physiology are ancient, but new discoveries continue in both, especially at the molecular level. Revealed content has ended. Give a few examples of variation in the human body. Answer. Start revealed content. Answers may include, but are not limited to, variations in height, hair texture, skin color, resting heart rate, branching of blood vessels, size and shape of muscles, absence of a muscle, presence of an extra bone. Revealed content has ended. 1.3 Levels of organization. Learn. List the levels of organization in the human body and the characteristics of each. Early investigators, limited in their ability to observe small structures such as cells, focused their attention on larger body parts. Studies of small structures had to await invention of magnifying lenses and microscopes, about 400 years ago. These tools revealed that larger body structures were made up of smaller parts, which, in turn, were composed of even smaller ones. All materials, including those that comprise the human body, are composed of chemicals. Chemicals consist of tiny particles called atoms, which are composed of even smaller subatomic particles. Atoms can join to form molecules, molecules, and small molecules may combine to form larger macromolecules. In humans and other organisms, the basic unit of structure and function is a cell. Although individual cells vary in size and shape, all share certain characteristics. Cells of complex organisms, including those of humans, contain structures called organelles that carry on specific activities. Organelles are composed of assemblies of large molecules, including proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. Most human cells contain a complete set of genetic instructions, yet use only a subset of them, allowing cells to specialize. All cells share the same characteristics of life and must meet certain requirements to stay alive. Page 13. Specialized cells assemble into layers or masses that have specific functions. Such a group of cells is called a tissue. Groups of different tissues form organs. Complex structures with specialized functions and groups of organs that function closely together comprise organ systems. Interacting organ systems make up an organism. A body part can be described at different levels. The heart, for example, consists of muscle, fat, and nervous tissue. These tissues, in turn, are constructed of cells, which contain organelles. All of the structures of life are, ultimately, composed of chemicals. Figure 1.3. Clinical application 1.1 describes two technologies used to visualize body parts based on body chemistry. Page 14. 1.1 Clinical application. Ultrasonography and magnetic resonance imaging, a tale of two patients. The two patients enter the hospital medical scanning unit hoping for opposite outcomes. Vanessa Q, who has had several pregnancy losses, hopes that an ultrasound exam will reveal that her current pregnancy is progressing normally. Michael P, a 16-year-old who has excruciating headaches, is to undergo a magnetic resonance (MR) scan to assure his physician, and himself, that the cause of the headaches is not a brain tumor. Ultrasound and magnetic resonance scans are non-invasive procedures that provide images of soft internal structures. Ultrasonography uses high-frequency sound waves beyond the range of human hearing. A technician gently presses a device called a transducer, which emits sound waves, against the skin and moves it slowly over the surface of the area being examined, which in this case is Vanessa's abdomen. Figure 1a. Prior to the exam, Vanessa drank several glasses of water. Her filled bladder will intensify the contrast between her uterus and its contents and nearby organs because as the sound waves from the transducer travel into the body, some of the waves reflect back to the transducer when they reach a border between structures of slightly different densities. Other sound waves continue into deeper tissues, and some of them are reflected back by still other interfaces. As the reflected sound waves reach the transducer, they are converted into electrical impulses that are amplified and used to create a sectional image of the body's internal structure on a viewing screen. This image is a sonogram, figure 1b. Glancing at the screen, Vanessa smiles. The image reveals the fetus in her uterus, heart beating, and already showing bud-like structures that will develop into arms and legs. She happily heads home with a video of the fetus. Vanessa's ultrasound exam takes only a few minutes, whereas Michael's MR scan takes an hour. First, Michael receives an injection of a dye that provides contrast so that a radiologist examining the skin can distinguish certain brain structures. Then, the motorized platform on which Michael lies moves into a chamber surrounded by a powerful magnet and a special radio antenna. The chamber, which looks like a metal donut, is the MR imaging instrument. As Michael settles back, closes his eyes, and listens to the music through earphones, a technician activates the device. The magnet generates a magnetic field that alters the alignment and spin of certain types of atoms within Michael's brain. At the same time, a second rotating magnetic field causes particular types of atoms, such as the hydrogen atoms in body fluids and organic compounds, to release weak radio waves with characteristic frequencies. The nearby antenna receives and amplifies the radio waves, which are then processed by a computer. Within a few minutes, the computer generates a sectional image based on the locations and concentrations of the atoms being studied, figure 1c. The device continues to produce data, painting portraits of Michael's brain from different angles. Michael and his parents nervously wait 2 days for the expert eyes of a radiologist to interpret the MR scan. Happily, the scan shows normal brain structure. Whatever is causing Michael's headaches, it is not a brain tumor, at least not one large enough to be imaged. Chapters 2. 6 discuss the levels of organization of the human body in greater detail. Chapter 2 describes the atomic and molecular levels. Chapter 3 presents organelles and cellular structures and functions. Chapter 4 explores cellular metabolism. Chapter 5 describes tissues, and Chapter 6 presents the skin and its accessory organs as an example of an organ system. The remaining chapters describe the structures and functions of the other organ systems in detail. Table 1.1 lists the levels of organization and some corresponding illustrations in this textbook. Practice 1.3. How does the human body illustrate levels of organization? Answer. Start revealed content. Larger structures are composed of smaller and smaller components. For example, the body consists of several systems, such as the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system consists of organs, such as the heart and blood vessels. The heart is composed of tissues, such as muscle tissue and connective tissue. Tissues consist of layers of cells, such as muscle cells and nerve cells. Cells are composed of organelles, which consist of molecules, and finally atoms. Revealed content has ended. What is an organism? Answer. Start revealed content. An organism is a complete unit of life. Organisms range in size from a single cell to a complex living thing like a human, which is composed of trillions of cells. Humans, as complex organisms, are composed of organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, molecules, and atoms. Revealed content has ended. How do body parts at different levels of organization vary in complexity? Answer. Start revealed content. Typically, the higher the level of organization a structure is part of, the more complex it is. For example, a molecule is composed of 2 or more atoms, therefore, a molecule is more complex than an atom. An organ system, such as the cardiovascular system, is composed of organs, such as the heart and blood vessels. Therefore, an organ system is more complex than any of its organs. Revealed content has ended. Page 15. 1.4 Core themes in anatomy and physiology. Learn. List and describe the key concepts in anatomy and physiology. List and describe the underlying mechanisms in anatomy and physiology. Certain core themes run throughout anatomy and physiology. These themes include key concepts common to the body and all of its systems, as well as the underlying mechanisms by which these concepts work. The lists below are not extensive, although they might seem so. Remember that each of these themes will return throughout this book. Special features called Reconnect and A Glimpse Ahead highlight these themes. Soon these lists will seem more like a get-together among old friends. Key concepts unlocking anatomy and physiology. Understanding the following key concepts will give you a solid foundation on which to build an understanding of anatomy and physiology. The cell. All living things on Earth consist of cells, from the single-celled bacteria and protozoans, to multi-celled organisms like humans. Understanding anatomy and physiology is, in a way, understanding what conditions keep cells alive and well. The internal environment. The internal environment is the environment within the body in which the cells live. Each cell is bounded by a cell membrane. The interior of the cell contains the intracellular fluid, outside the cell is extracellular fluid, the immediate environment of the cell. Even though the extracellular fluid is outside each cell's membrane, it is called the internal environment because it is inside the body. The environment outside of the body may vary, but human cells can survive only if the internal environment is maintained relatively constant. Homeostasis. Homeostasis, homeostasis, is the maintenance of a relatively constant internal environment. The human body is essentially a community of cells in which different cells perform different functions, almost all of which are geared toward maintaining homeostasis. Cells involved in reproduction do not have a direct role in maintaining homeostasis, but they have the special role of continuing the species. Interdependency of cells. The fact that different cells contribute to homeostasis in different ways means that cells depend on one another. If some cells aren't able to function, other cells and even the entire organism may suffer. One example is the loss of cells from the heart as a result of a heart attack. This places an additional workload on remaining heart cells. If the loss of functional cells is substantial, the organism may die. Structure and function. Structure and function are interrelated. An understanding of structure illuminates function, and vice versa. Underlying mechanisms and processes foundations of understanding. Cells form more complex body structures such as tissues, organs, and organ systems, and all contribute to homeostasis through specific mechanisms. These mechanisms will repeat throughout this book, so once you learn them you will have a head start on upcoming chapters. Gradients and permeability. Substances move between cells and throughout the body in a number of ways. One way is movement from high to low, said to be down a gradient. In the case of blood flow, or air moving in and out of the lungs, the movement is down a pressure gradient, from high pressure to low pressure. Substances also move from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration, down a concentration gradient, by a process called diffusion. Because a cell membrane bounds each cell, membrane permeability, what it allows in or out, is important. If a substance can pass through a cell membrane, that substance is said to be permeant, and the membrane is said to be permeable to that substance. When considering whether a given substance can enter or leave a cell by diffusion, one must not only account for the concentration gradient, but also know whether the cell membrane is permeable to that particular substance. Cellular differentiation, gene leads to protein leads to function. The wide range of cellular structures and the functions that cells perform throughout the body may be surprising considering that all of a person's cells originate from a single fertilized egg. The cells become specialized by the process of cellular differentiation, differentiation. Different cell types, such as muscle cells and nerve cells, access the information encoded in different genes to make specific proteins. The proteins that any cell makes determine that cell's function. Cell membrane mechanisms. The cell membrane determines which substances can enter a cell and which cannot. It also allows cells to respond to certain signals, but to ignore other signals. Cell-to-cell communication. Cooperation among cells requires that they be able to communicate with each other. This occurs through a variety of mechanisms, many of which involve the cell membrane and specialized molecules on the membrane called membrane receptors. Page 16. Feedback loops. For systems to maintain homeostasis, cells must signal other cells when the internal environment has been compromised so that adjustments can be made. When the instability has been corrected, cells must signal that the adjustments are no longer necessary. The mechanisms that accomplish these changes are called homeostatic mechanisms, and they work through a form of cell-to-cell communication called a feedback loop. As will be discussed in section 1.5, feedback loops can be either negative or positive, depending on what they control. Balance. In order to maintain the internal environment relatively constant, the body must replace substances that are lost and eliminate substances that are in excess. For example, as proteins are made and used to build stronger muscle cells, the chemicals that proteins are made of, amino acids, must be replaced in the diet or produced in the body. An example of elimination is carbon dioxide, produced by cellular activity. The carbon dioxide must be removed from the internal environment via the lungs. Energy processes. All of the processes in the body involve some form of energy, whether heat energy, which keeps cells chemically active, or energy released from certain chemical reactions in a form that cells can use. These processes are discussed more in chapter 4, but they pertain to cellular function in general. Practice 1.4. How are cells interdependent on each other? Answer. Start revealed content. Cells are specialized to make unique contributions to maintaining homeostasis. They work together as tissues, which form organs, which in turn form organ systems. Some cells detect changes in the internal environment and communicate with other cells, which then initiate responses to correct the changes. Cells that defend an organism against infection or disease, for example, contribute to the health of other cells in the organism, and of the entire organism. Revealed content has ended. How is balance related to the internal environment? Answer. Start revealed content. For the internal environment to be maintained constant, input must be balanced by output. Substances or conditions that are in excess, such as extra heat production, must be matched by increased elimination, such as increased heat loss. Shortages must be matched by increased intake or production. Revealed content has ended. 1.5 The characteristics and maintenance of life. Learn. List and describe the major characteristics of life. Give examples of metabolism. List and describe the major requirements of organisms. Explain the importance of homeostasis to survival. Describe the parts of a homeostatic mechanism and explain how they function together. Nearly all body structures and functions work in ways that maintain life. The exception is an organism's reproductive system, which perpetuates the species. Characteristics of life. We think of the qualities that constitute the state of being alive at moments like the birth of a baby, as an injury happens, or at the time of death following a long illness. Although this textbook addresses the human body, all types of organisms share the most fundamental characteristics of life. As living organisms, we can respond to our surroundings. Our bodies grow, eventually becoming able to reproduce. We gain energy by ingesting, taking in, digesting, breaking down, absorbing, and assimilating the nutrients in food. The absorbed substances circulate throughout the internal environment of our bodies. We can then, by the process of respiration, use the energy in these nutrients for such vital functions as growth and repair. Finally, we excrete wastes. Taken together, these physiological events that obtain, release, and use energy are a major part of metabolism, which refers to the collection of chemical reactions in cells that support life. Table 1.2 summarizes the characteristics of life. Requirements of organisms. Human life depends upon the following environmental factors. Chemicals. Water is the most abundant chemical in all living systems. It is required for many metabolic processes and provides the environment in which most of them take place. Water also carries substances within the organism and is important in regulating body temperature. Water inside the cells, along with substances dissolved in it, constitutes the intracellular fluid. Similarly, outside of the cells, including the interstitial fluid, tissue fluid, and the liquid portion of the blood, plasma, is the extracellular fluid, figure 1.4. Other chemicals such as carbon dioxide and oxygen are readily exchanged between living systems and the environment. Food, often called nutrients, is brought in and waste chemicals are eliminated. Heat is a form of energy. It is a product of metabolic reactions, and the degree of heat present partly determines the rate at which these reactions occur. Generally, the more heat, the more rapidly chemical reactions take place. Temperature is a measure of the degree of heat. Pressure is an application of force to something. For example, the force on the outside of the body due to the weight of air above it is called atmospheric pressure. In humans, this pressure is important in breathing. Similarly, organisms living underwater are subjected to hydrostatic pressure. A liquid exerts due to the weight of water above them. In humans, heart action produces blood pressure, another form of hydrostatic pressure, which forces blood to flow through the vessels. Page 17. The human organism requires water, food, oxygen, heat, and pressure, but these factors alone are not enough to ensure survival. Both the quantities and the qualities of such factors are also important. Homeostasis. Homeostasis refers to the body's ability to keep its internal conditions stable, such that its cells can survive. To this end, all cells, whether as part of a tissue, an organ, or an organ system, make some specific contribution. Most of Earth's residents are unicellular, or single-celled. The most ancient and abundant unicellular organisms are the bacteria. Their cells do not have membrane-bound organelles. Some unicellular organisms have organelles that are as complex as our own. This is the case for the amoeba, figure 1.5. It survives and reproduces as long as its lake or pond environment is of a tolerable temperature and composition, and the amoeba can obtain food. With a limited ability to move, the amoeba depends upon the conditions in its lake or pond environment to stay alive. In contrast to the amoeba, adult humans are composed of over 30 trillion cells that maintain their own environment, our bodies. Our cells, as parts of organs and organ systems, interact in ways that keep this internal environment relatively constant, despite an ever-changing outside environment. Homeostasis is so important that it requires most of our metabolic energy. The interstitial fluid, which bathes cells in the body, is the environment to which those cells are most directly exposed, but the composition of the interstitial fluid is in equilibrium with the composition of the blood plasma, so both contribute to the internal environment. This relationship also explains why a simple blood test can provide important information about what is going on in the body's internal environment. The body maintains homeostasis through a number of self-regulating control systems called homeostatic mechanisms, which are based on feedback loops. These mechanisms generally share three components, figure 1.6. Receptors are on the lookout. They provide information about specific conditions, stimuli, in the internal environment. A receptor may be as small as a cell or even a protein that is part of a cell. A control center, or decision maker, that includes a set point, which is a particular value, such as body temperature at 37 degrees Celsius, or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Note, more metric equivalents can be found in Appendix B, Metric Measurement System and Conversions. Metric units are used throughout this text. Effectors, such as muscles or glands, take action. They cause appropriate responses. In most homeostatic mechanisms, effectors are activated, or deactivated, such that conditions return toward normal. As this happens, the deviation from the set point progressively lessens, and the effector activity gradually returns to original levels. Such responses are said to operate by negative feedback loops, because the deviation from the set point is corrected, moves in the opposite, or negative, direction, and because the correction reduces the response of the effectors. This latter aspect is important because it prevents a correction from going too far. To better understand the idea of negative feedback maintaining a stable internal environment, imagine a room equipped with a furnace and an air conditioner. If the room temperature is to remain near 20 degrees Celsius 68 degrees Fahrenheit despite changes in the outside temperature, the thermostat must be adjusted to a set point of 20 degrees Celsius. A thermostat is sensitive to temperature changes, so it will signal the furnace to start and the air conditioner to stop whenever the room temperature drops below the set point. If the temperature rises above the set point, the thermostat will stop the furnace and start the air conditioner. These actions maintain a relatively constant temperature in the room. Figure 1.7a. Page 18. Practice Figure 1.7. What would happen to room temperature if the set point were turned up? Answer. Start revealed content. The heat would come on until the temperature reached the new set point. Revealed content has ended. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Animation, Homeostasis, Thermoregulation 3D. A homeostatic mechanism similar to a thermostat regulates body temperature in humans. Figure 1.7b. The body's thermostat is a temperature-sensitive region in a control center of the brain called the hypothalamus. In healthy persons, the set point of this body thermostat is at or near 37 degrees Celsius 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Page 19. If a person becomes overheated, thermoreceptors, temperature receptors, throughout the body detect the change, and in response the hypothalamus initiates a series of actions that dissipate body heat. Sweat glands in the skin secrete watery perspiration that evaporates from the surface, carrying away heat and cooling the skin. At the same time, blood vessels in the skin dilate. This allows more blood that carries heat from deeper tissues to reach the surface, where the heat is lost to the outside. If a person is exposed to a cold environment and the body temperature begins to drop, thermoreceptors detect the change and the hypothalamus initiates heat-conserving and heat-generating activities. Blood vessels in the skin constrict, reducing blood flow and enabling deeper tissues to retain heat. At the same time, small groups of muscle cells may be stimulated to contract involuntarily, an action called shivering that produces heat, which helps warm the body. Section 6.3, Skin Functions, discusses body temperature regulation in more detail. Another homeostatic mechanism regulates the concentration of the sugar glucose in the blood. In this case, cells of an organ called the pancreas determine the set point. If the concentration of blood glucose increases following a meal, the pancreas detects this change and releases a chemical, insulin, into the blood. Insulin allows glucose to move from the blood into various body cells and to be stored in the liver and muscles. As this occurs, the concentration of blood glucose decreases, and as it reaches the normal set point, the pancreas decreases its release of insulin. If, on the other hand, blood glucose concentration falls too low, the pancreas detects this change and secretes a different chemical, glucagon, that releases stored glucose into the blood. Section 13.8, Pancreas, Hormones of the Pancreatic Islets, discusses regulation of the blood glucose concentration in more detail. See Figure 13.35. Human physiology offers many other examples of homeostatic mechanisms, which all work in the same basic way just described. Just as many anatomical terms are used in all areas of anatomy, so the basic principles of physiology apply in all organ systems. In some cases, homeostatic mechanisms operate by positive feedback loops, in which a change is not reversed but intensified, and the effector activity is initially increased rather than turned off. An example is the distorted sound that occurs during a concert or a speech if the volume on the amplifier is too high. Figure 1.8a. A physiological example is blood clotting, in which certain chemicals stimulate more clotting, which minimizes bleeding. See Section 14.4. Hemostasis, blood coagulation. Preventing blood loss following an injury is critical to sustaining life. Another positive feedback mechanism increases the strength of uterine contractions during childbirth. See Section 23.3, Pregnancy and the prenatal period, birth process, and Figure 1.8b. Positive feedback mechanisms usually produce unstable conditions, which might not seem compatible with homeostasis. However, the few examples of positive feedback associated with health have very specific functions and are short-lived. Organ systems contribute to homeostasis in different ways. For example, resources brought in by the digestive and respiratory systems are delivered to all body cells by the cardiovascular system. The same blood that brings needed nutrients to cells carries away waste products, which are removed by the respiratory and urinary systems. Figure 1.9. Homeostatic mechanisms maintain a relatively constant internal environment, yet physiological values may vary slightly in a person from time to time or from one person to another. Therefore, both normal values for an individual and the idea of a normal range for the general population are clinically important. Numerous examples of homeostasis are presented throughout this book, and normal ranges for a number of physiological variables are listed in Appendix C, Laboratory Tests of Clinical Importance. Page 20. Practice 1.5. What is the function of metabolism in the body? Answer. Start revealed content. Metabolism includes all of the physiological events that obtain, release, and use energy. It includes all of the chemical reactions that occur in cells to support life. Metabolism consists of the processes of respiration, digestion, circulation, and excretion. Respiration, for example, supplies oxygen to break down nutrients, and gets rid of carbon dioxide, a byproduct of nutrient breakdown. Revealed content has ended. Which requirements of organisms does the external environment provide? Answer. Start revealed content. The external environment provides water, nutrients, some heat, some is produced during metabolic reactions to oxygen and pressure. Atmospheric pressure is provided for humans. External hydrostatic pressure is mainly provided to water-dwelling organisms. Revealed content has ended. Why is homeostasis so important to survival? Answer. Start revealed content. Survival of the human organism depends on the survival of its cells. Homeostasis maintains the internal environment in which those cells live. Revealed content has ended. Describe 3 homeostatic mechanisms. Answer. Start revealed content. Negative feedback is a common homeostatic mechanism. When a variable deviates from its set point, this mechanism activates effectors that return the variable toward its normal range. Body temperature and the level of blood glucose are body regulated by negative feedback. For example, if a person is too hot, sweating and increased blood flow to the skin return the body temperature to its normal range. A less common mechanism is positive feedback, in which a change in a variable leads to further deviation from the set point. During blood clotting, certain chemicals stimulate further blood clotting to stop the bleeding. Revealed content has ended. 1.6 Organization of the human body. Learn. Identify the locations of the major body cavities. List the organs located in each major body cavity. Name and identify the locations of the membranes associated with the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. Name the major organ systems, and list the organs associated with each. Describe the general function of each organ system. The human organism is a complex structure composed of many parts working together to maintain homeostasis. The human body's major features include cavities, various types of membranes, and organ systems. Body cavities. The human body can be divided into an axial, AKCL, portion, which includes the head, neck, and trunk, and an appendicular, portion, which includes the upper and lower limbs. Within the axial portion are the cranial cavity, which houses the brain, the vertebral canal, spinal cavity, which contains the spinal cord and is surrounded by sections of the backbone, vertebrae, the thoracic, thoracic cavity, and the abdominopelvic, abdominopelvic cavity. The organs within these last 2 cavities are called viscera, viscera. Figure 1.10 shows these major body cavities. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Body Cavities. The thoracic cavity is separated from the abdominopelvic cavity by a broad, thin muscle called the diaphragm. When it is at rest, this muscle curves upward into the thorax like a dome. When it contracts during inhalation, it presses down upon the abdominal viscera. The wall of the thoracic cavity is composed of skin, skeletal muscles, and bones. A compartment called the mediastinum, extends forward to the sternum and backward to the vertebral column. It forms a boundary between the right and left sides of the thoracic cavity. The mediastinum contains most of the thoracic cavity viscera, including the heart, esophagus, trachea, and thymus, except for the lungs. The right and left lungs are on either side of the mediastinum. The abdominopelvic cavity, which includes an upper abdominal portion and a lower pelvic portion, extends from the diaphragm to the floor of the pelvis. Its wall primarily consists of skin, skeletal muscles, and bones. The viscera within the abdominal cavity include the stomach, liver, spleen, gallbladder, kidneys, and the small and large intestines. The pelvic cavity is the portion of the abdominopelvic cavity enclosed by the pelvic bones. It contains the terminal end of the large intestine, the urinary bladder, and the internal reproductive organs. Smaller cavities within the head include the following. Figure 1.11. Oral cavity, containing the teeth and tongue. Nasal cavity, connecting with several air-filled sinuses. See figure 7.21. Orbital cavities, containing the eyes and associated skeletal muscles and nerves. Tympanic cavities, containing the middle ear bones. Page 21. Thoracic and abdominopelvic membranes. Thin serous membranes line the walls of the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities and fold back to cover the organs within these cavities. These membranes secrete a slippery serous fluid that separates the layer lining the wall of the cavity, parietal layer, from the layer covering an organ, visceral layer. For example, the right and left thoracic compartments, which contain the lungs, are each lined with a serous membrane called the parietal pleura. This membrane folds back to cover the lung on that side, forming the visceral pleura. Normally, only a thin film of serous fluid separates the parietal and visceral pleural, pleural membranes. However, the space between them may become significantly larger as a result of illness or injury. Such membranes are said to be separated by a potential space. This potential space is called the pleural cavity. The heart, located in the broadest portion of the mediastinum, is surrounded by pericardial membranes. A thin visceral pericardium, epicardium, covers the heart's surface and is separated from the parietal pericardium by a small volume of serous fluid. The potential space between these membranes is called the pericardial cavity. The parietal pericardium is covered by a much thicker third layer, the fibrous pericardium. Figure 1.12 shows the membranes associated with the heart and lungs. Page 22. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Pleura and Pericardium. In the abdominopelvic cavity, the membranes are called peritoneal, peritonal. Membranes. A parietal peritoneum lines the wall of the abdominopelvic cavity, and a visceral peritoneum covers most of the organs in the abdominopelvic cavity. The potential space between these membranes is called the peritoneal cavity, figure 1.13. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Peritoneum. Page 23. Practice 1.6. What are the viscera? Answer. Start revealed content. Viscera are the organs within the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. Revealed content has ended. Which organs occupy the thoracic cavity? The abdominal cavity? The pelvic cavity? Answer. Start revealed content. Heart, lungs, trachea, esophagus, thymus. Stomach, liver, spleen, gallbladder, kidneys, small intestine, most of the large intestine. Terminal end of the large intestine, urinary bladder, internal reproductive organs. Revealed content has ended. Name the cavities of the head. Answer. Start revealed content. Cranial cavity, oral cavity, nasal cavity, orbital cavities, middle ear cavities. Revealed content has ended. Describe the membranes associated with the thoracic cavity. Answer. Start revealed content. Double-layered serous membranes line the walls of the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities and surround each organ. The parietal layer lines the wall of the cavity, and the visceral layer surrounds an organ. Between the layers is a potential space, or cavity, filled with lubricating fluid. The pleural membranes surround the lungs, the pericardial membrane surrounds the heart, and the peritoneal membrane surrounds the abdominopelvic organs. Revealed content has ended. Distinguish between the parietal and visceral peritoneum. Answer. Start revealed content. The parietal peritoneum lines the inner surface of the wall of the abdominopelvic cavity, and the visceral peritoneum covers the surfaces of most abdominopelvic organs. Revealed content has ended. Organ systems. Each of the body's organ systems includes a set of interrelated organs that work together to provide specialized functions. The maintenance of homeostasis depends on the coordination of organ systems. A figure called interconnections at the end of some chapters ties together the ways in which organ systems interact. As you read about each organ system, you may want to consult the illustrations and cadaver photos of the human torso in reference. Plates 1. 25 at the end of this chapter and locate some of the structures described in the text. The introduction to the organ systems that follows describes overall functions. Body covering. The organs of the integumentary system, figure 1.14, include the skin and accessory organs such as the hair, nails, sweat glands, and sebaceous glands. These parts protect underlying tissues, help regulate body temperature, house a variety of sensory receptors, and synthesize certain products. Chapter 6 discusses the integumentary system. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Integumentary System. Support and movement. The organs of the skeletal and muscular systems support and move body parts. The skeletal system, figure 1.15, consists of the bones as well as the ligaments and cartilages that bind bones together at joints. These parts provide frameworks and protective shields for softer tissues, serve as attachments for muscles, and act together with muscles when body parts move. Tissues within bones also produce blood cells and store inorganic salts. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Skeletal System. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Muscular System. The muscles are the organs of the muscular system, figure 1.15. By contracting and pulling their ends closer together, muscles provide the forces that move body parts. Muscles also help maintain posture and are the primary source of body heat. Chapters 7, 8, and 9 discuss the skeletal and muscular systems. Integration and coordination. For the body to act as a unit, its parts must be integrated and coordinated. The nervous and endocrine systems control and adjust various organ functions from time to time, maintaining homeostasis. The nervous system, figure 1.16, consists of the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and sense organs. Nerve cells within these organs use a bioelectrical signal called an impulse, an action potential, in combination with a chemical signal, a neurotransmitter, to communicate with one another and with muscles and glands. Each neurotransmitter produces a rapid, relatively short-term effect, making it well suited for situations that require immediate, but not necessarily long-lasting, responses. Some nerve cells act in concert with specialized sensory receptors that can detect changes inside and outside the body. Other nerve cells receive the signals from these sensory units and interpret and act on the information. Still other nerve cells carry signals from the brain or spinal cord to muscles or glands, causing them to contract or to secrete products, respectively, in response. A body part is said to be innervated by the nerve cells that connect with it. Chapters 10 and 11 discuss the nervous system, and Chapter 12 discusses sense organs. Page 24. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Nervous System. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Endocrine System. The endocrine system, figure 1.16, includes all the glands that secrete chemical messengers, called hormones. Hormones, in turn, travel away from the glands in body fluids such as interstitial fluid and blood. A particular hormone affects only a particular group of cells, called its target cells. A hormone alters the metabolism of its target cells. Hormonal effects last longer than those of neurotransmitters, making them well suited for responses that need to be maintained. Organs of the endocrine system include the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, and adrenal glands, as well as the pancreas, ovaries, testes, pineal gland, and thymus. These are discussed further in Chapter 13. Learn a glimpse ahead. Cell-to-cell communication, to Section 10.5, synaptic transmission, and Section 13.1, general characteristics of the endocrine system. For both the nervous system and the endocrine system, it is essential that the cells being controlled are able to respond to the chemical stimulation, either by the neurotransmitter or by the hormone. This response requires special chemical receptors on the cells, without which the cells cannot respond. Many drugs act by binding receptors to stimulate a response. This is the case for beta agonists, which asthma patients use in inhalants. Many other drugs block receptors to prevent an action. Such drugs include the beta blockers many heart disease patients use and certain cancer drugs. Transport. Two organ systems transport substances throughout the internal environment. The cardiovascular system, figure 1.17, includes the heart, arteries, capillaries, veins, and blood. The heart is a muscular pump that helps force blood through the blood vessels. Blood carries gases, nutrients, hormones, and wastes. It carries oxygen from the lungs and nutrients from the digestive organs to all body cells, where these substances are used in metabolic processes. Blood also carries hormones from endocrine glands to their target cells and carries wastes from body cells to the excretory organs, where the wastes are removed from the blood and released to the outside. Blood and the cardiovascular system are discussed in Chapters 14 and 15. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Cardiovascular System. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Lymphatic System. The lymphatic system, figure 1.17, is the other transport system and is closely associated with the cardiovascular system. It is composed of the lymphatic vessels, lymph fluid, lymph nodes, thymus, and spleen. This system transports some of the fluid from the spaces and tissues, interstitial fluid, back to the bloodstream and carries certain fatty substances away from the digestive organs. Cells of the lymphatic system, such as lymphocytes, defend the body against infections by removing pathogens, disease-causing microorganisms and viruses, from tissue fluid. The lymphatic system is discussed in Chapter 16. Absorption and excretion. Organs in several systems absorb nutrients and oxygen and excrete wastes. The organs of the digest-4 system, figure 1.18, discussed in detail in Chapter 17, receive foods and then break down food molecules into simpler forms that can be absorbed into the internal environment. Certain digestive organs, see Chapter 17, also produce hormones and thus function as parts of the endocrine system. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Digestive System. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Respiratory System. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Urinary System. The digestive system includes the mouth, tongue, teeth, salivary glands, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, small intestine, and large intestine. Chapter 18 discusses nutrition and metabolism, considering the fate of foods in the body. Page 25. The organs of the respiratory system, figure 1.18, move air in and out of the body and exchange gases between the blood and the air. Specifically, oxygen passes from air in the lungs into the blood, and carbon dioxide leaves the blood and enters the air in the lungs and then moves out of the body. The nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs are parts of this system, discussed in Chapter 19. The urinary system, figure 1.18, consists of the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. The kidneys remove wastes from blood and assist in maintaining the body's water and electrolyte concentrations. Electrolytes are chemicals, related to salts. The product of these activities is urine. Other parts of the urinary system store urine and transport it to outside the body. Chapter 20 discusses the urinary system. Sometimes the urinary system is called the excretory system. However, excretion, removal of waste from the body, is also a function of the respiratory system and, to a lesser extent, the digestive and integumentary systems. Reproduction, is the process of producing offspring, progeny. Cells reproduce when they divide and give rise to new cells. The reproductive system, figure 1.19, of an organism, however, produces whole new organisms like itself, see Chapters 22 and 23. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Male Reproductive System. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems, Female Reproductive System. Page 26. The male reproductive system includes the scrotum, testes, epididymides, ductus deferentia, seminal vesicles, prostate gland, bulbourethral glands, urethra, and penis. These structures produce and maintain the male sex cells, or sperm cells, spermatozoa. The male reproductive system also transfers these cells into the female reproductive tract and produces hormones. The female reproductive system consists of the ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, vagina, clitoris, and vulva. These organs produce and maintain the female sex cells, oocytes, transport these cells in the female reproductive system, and receive the male's sperm cells, which may fertilize an oocyte. The female reproductive system also supports development of an embryo, carries a fetus to term, functions in the birth process, and produces hormones. Table 1.3 summarizes the organ systems, the major organs that comprise them, and their major functions, in the order in which they are presented in this book. Figure 1.20 illustrates the organ systems in humans. Page 27. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Organ Systems. Practice 1.6. Name the major organ systems and list the organs of each system. Answer. Start revealed content. Integumentary system, skin, hair, nails, sweat, and sebaceous glands. Skeletal system, bones, ligaments, cartilages. Muscular system, muscles. Nervous system, brain, spinal cord, nerves, and sense organs. Endocrine system, endocrine glands, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, parathyroid glands, adrenal glands, pancreas, ovaries, testes, pineal gland, and thymus. Cardiovascular system, heart, arteries, veins, capillaries. Lymphatic system, lymph nodes, thymus, and spleen. Digestive system, mouth, teeth, tongue, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, salivary glands, liver, pancreas, and gallbladder. Respiratory system, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. Urinary system, kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. Reproductive system of male, scrotum, testes, epididymides, ductus deferentia, seminal vesicles, prostate gland, bulbourethral glands, penis, and urethra. Reproductive system of female, ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, vagina, clitoris, and vulva. Revealed content has ended. Describe the general functions of each organ system. Answer. Start revealed content. Integumentary system, protects tissues, regulates body temperature, detects changes in environment via sensory receptors, and synthesizes specific chemicals, such as vitamin D. Skeletal system, provides a framework for the body, supports and protects internal organs and soft tissues, helps with body movements, produces blood cells, and stores inorganic salts, such as calcium salts. Muscular system, provides force to move body parts, maintains posture, and produces most of the body heat. Nervous system, regulates and adjusts organ function for homeostasis, detects changes in the environment, receives and interprets sensory information, and responds to this information by stimulating muscles and glands. Endocrine system, regulates and adjusts organ function for homeostasis, and communicates via hormone secretion into body fluids. Each hormone alters metabolism of specific target cells. Cardiovascular system, transports red and white blood cells, platelets, respiratory gases, nutrients, hormones, and waste throughout the body. Lymphatic system, defends the body against infection and disease, transports some tissue fluid back to the bloodstream, and carries large fats from the digestive system to the general circulation. Digestive system, receives nutrients from the environment, breaks down food particles into smaller molecules that can be absorbed across cell membranes and enter body fluids, eliminates wastes, and produces hormones to regulate digestive processes. Respiratory system, moves air into and out of the lungs, and exchanges oxygen and carbon dioxide between the lungs and the blood. Urinary system, removes blood wastes, helps maintain water, electrolyte, and acid-base balance, produces urine, and transports urine to the outside of the body. Reproductive system of male, produces and maintains sperm, produces hormones that develop male body type, and transfers sperm to the female reproductive tract. Reproductive system of female, produces and maintains oocytes, eggs, produces hormones that develop female body type, receives sperm for fertilization, supports development of the embryo and fetus, functions in birth process, and nourishes infant. Revealed content has ended. Page 28. 1.7 Lifespan changes. Learn. Identify changes related to aging, from the microscopic to the whole body level. Aging refers to the changes in the body that occur with the passage of time. It is the process of becoming mature or old, and is a part of life. Because the passage of time is inevitable, so, too, is aging, despite common claims for the anti-aging properties of various diets, cosmetics, pills, and skincare products. Aging happens everywhere in the body, from the microscopic to the whole body level. Although programmed cell death begins in the fetus, as structures form, we are usually not very aware of aging until the third decade of life, when a few gray hairs, faint lines etched into facial skin, and minor joint stiffness in the morning remind us that time marches on. A female over the age of 35 attempting to conceive a child might be shocked to learn that she is of advanced maternal age, because the chances of conceiving an offspring with an abnormal chromosome number increase with the age of the oocyte. For most people, by the fourth or fifth decade, as hair color fades and skin wrinkles, the first signs of adult-onset disorders may appear, such as elevated blood pressure that one day may be considered hypertension, and slightly high blood glucose that could become type 2 diabetes mellitus. A person with a strong family history of heart disease, coupled with unhealthy diet and exercise habits, may be advised to change his or her lifestyle, and perhaps begin taking medication to lower serum cholesterol levels. The sixth decade sees grayer or whiter hair, more and deeper skin wrinkles, and a waning immunity that makes vaccinations against influenza and other infectious diseases important. Yet many, if not most, people in their 60s and older have sharp minds and are capable of many types of physical activities. Changes at the tissue, cell, and molecular levels explain the familiar signs of aging. Decreased production of the connective tissue proteins collagen and elastin account for the stiffening of skin, and diminished levels of subcutaneous fat are responsible for wrinkling. Proportions of fat to water in the tissues change, with the percentage of fats increasing steadily in females, and increasing until about age 60 in males. These alterations explain why older adults metabolize certain drugs at different rates than do younger people. As a person ages, tissues atrophy, and as a result, organs shrink. Cells mark time too, many approaching the end of a limited number of predetermined cell divisions as their chromosome tips whittle down. Such cells reaching the end of their division days may enlarge or die. Some cells may be unable to build the apparatus that pulls apart replicated chromosomes in a cell on the verge of division. Impaired cell division slows wound healing, yet at the same time, the inappropriate cell division that underlies cancer becomes more likely. Certain subcellular functions lose efficiency, including repair of DNA damage and transport of substances into and out of cells. Aging cells are less efficient at extracting energy from nutrients and breaking down aged or damaged cell parts. As changes at the tissue level cause organ-level signs of aging, certain biochemical changes fuel cellular aging. Lipofuscin and ceroid pigments accumulate when a cell can no longer prevent the formation of oxygen-free radicals. A protein called beta amyloid may build up in the brain, contributing, in some individuals, to the development of Alzheimer's disease. A generalized metabolic slowdown results from a dampening of thyroid gland function, impairing glucose use, the rate of protein synthesis, and production of digestive enzymes. At the whole body level, we notice slowed metabolism as diminished tolerance to cold, weight gain, and fatigue. Several investigations are identifying key characteristics, particularly gene variants, which people who live more than 100 years share. These fortunate individuals, called centenarians, fall into three broad groups. About 20% of them never get the diseases that kill most people, 40% get these diseases but at much older ages than average, and the other 40% live with and survive the more common disorders of aging. Environmental factors are important, too. Another trait centenarians share is never having smoked. Our organs and organ systems are interrelated, so aging-related changes in one influence the functioning of others. Several chapters in this book conclude with a lifespan changes section that discusses changes specific to particular organ systems. These changes reflect the natural breakdown of structure and function that accompanies the passage of time, as well as events in our genes, nature, and symptoms or characteristics that might arise as a consequence of lifestyle choices and circumstances. Nurture. Practice 1.7. Define aging. Answer. Start revealed content. Aging refers to the changes in the body that occur with the passage of time. Revealed content has ended. List some aging-related changes at the microscopic and whole body levels. Answer. Start revealed content. Changes at the microscopic level include decreased production of elastin and collagen proteins, diminished subcutaneous fat, which leads to skin wrinkling, increased percentage of body fat, which alters the rate of drug metabolism, decreased efficiency of DNA repair mechanisms, and decreased efficiency of energy extraction from nutrients. Whole body changes include fading hair color, wrinkling skin, loss of effectiveness of the immune system, increased blood pressure, and slightly elevated blood glucose, which may become clinically significant. Revealed content has ended. 1.8 Anatomical terminology. Learn. Properly use the terms that describe relative positions, body sections, and body regions. To communicate effectively with one another, investigators over the ages have developed a set of terms with precise meanings for discussing the human body and its parts. These terms concern the relative positions of body parts, refer to imaginary planes along which cuts may be made, or describe body regions. Using such terms assumes that the body is in the anatomical position: standing erect, face forward, upper limbs at the sides, palms forward. Relative position. Terms of relative position are used to describe the location of one body part with respect to another. They include the following. Many of these terms are illustrated in figure 1.21. Superior, superior, means a part is above another part. The thoracic cavity is superior to the abdominopelvic cavity. Inferior, inferior, means a part is below another part. The neck is inferior to the head. Page 29. Anterior, ventral, means toward the front. The eyes are anterior to the brain. Posterior, dorsal, means toward the back. The pharynx is posterior to the oral cavity. Medial, refers to an imaginary midline dividing the body into equal right and left halves. A part is medial if it is closer to midline than another part. The nose is medial to the eyes. Lateral, means toward the side, away from midline. The ears are lateral to the eyes. Bilateral, refers to paired structures, one on each side of midline. The lungs are bilateral. Ipsilateral, refers to structures on the same side. The right lung and the right kidney are ipsilateral. Contralateral, refers to structures on the opposite side. A patient with a fractured right leg would have to bear weight on the contralateral, in this case, left lower limb. Proximal, describes a part closer to a point of attachment to the trunk than another body part. The elbow is proximal to the wrist. Proximal may also refer to another reference point such as the proximal tubules, which are closer to the filtering structures in the kidney. Distal, is the opposite of proximal. It means a particular body part is farther from a point of attachment to the trunk. The fingers are distal to the wrist. Distal may also refer to another reference point, such as decreased blood flow distal to blockage of a coronary artery. Superficial, means near the surface. The epidermis is the superficial layer of the skin. Deep, describes more internal parts. The dermis is the deep layer of the skin. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Directional Terms. Sometimes these terms are combined such that both meanings apply. For example, the anterolateral portions of the skull are toward the front and on either side. Body sections. To observe the relative locations and arrangements of internal parts, it is necessary to cut, or section, the body along various planes, figures 1.22 and 1.23. The following terms describe such planes and sections. Sagittal, refers to a lengthwise cut that divides the body into right and left portions. If a sagittal section passes along the midline and divides the body into equal parts, it is called median, mid-sagittal. A sagittal section lateral to midline is called parasagittal. Transverse, horizontal, refers to a cut that divides the body into superior and inferior portions. Page 30. Frontal, coronal, refers to a section that divides the body into anterior and posterior portions. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Planes of Section. Sometimes a cylindrical organ such as a blood vessel is sectioned. In this case, a cut across the structure is called a cross-section, an angular cut is called an oblique section, and a lengthwise cut is called a longitudinal section, figure 1.24. Body parts and regions. Parts of the axial portion of the body can be described using terms similar to the names of the cavities within them. The trunk includes the thorax, chest, the pelvis, area associated with the hips, and the abdomen, area below the chest and above the pelvis. Page 31. The appendicular portion can be described in more detail as well. The upper limbs include the arms, from shoulder to elbow, and the forearms, from elbow to hand. Similarly, the lower limbs include the thigh, from hip to knee, and the leg, from knee to foot. A number of terms designate body regions. The abdominal area, for example, is subdivided into the following regions, as shown in Figure 1.25a. The epigastric, region is the upper middle portion. The right and left hypochondriac, regions are on the right/left side of the epigastric region. The umbilical, region is the central portion. The right and left lateral, lumbar, regions are on the right/left side of the umbilical region. The pubic, hypogastric, region is the lower middle portion. The right and left inguinal, iliac, regions are on the right/left side of the pubic region. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Abdominal Quadrants and Regions. The abdominal area may also be subdivided into the following 4 quadrants, as figure 1.25b illustrates. Right upper quadrant, RUQ. Right lower quadrant, RLQ. Left upper quadrant, LUQ. Left lower quadrant, LLQ. The following adjectives are commonly used when referring to various body parts and regions. Figure 1.26 illustrates some of these regions. APR Module 1, Body Orientation, Dissection, Body Regions. Abdominal, abdominal, region between the thorax and pelvis. Acromial, point of the shoulder. Antebrachial, forearm. Antecubital, anterior surface of the elbow. Axillary, armpit. Brachial, arm. Page 32. Buccal, cheek. carpal, carpal, wrist. Celiac, celiac, abdomen. Cephalic, phallic, head. Cervical, cervical, neck. Costal, costal, ribs. Coxal, coxal, hip. Crural, crural, leg. Cubital, kyobih, elbow. Digital, dijih, finger or toe. Dorsal, dorsal, back. Femoral, femoral, thigh. Frontal, frontal, forehead. Genital, genital, external reproductive organs. Gluteal, glotl, buttocks. Inguinal, inguinal, depressed area of the abdominal wall near the thigh, groin. Lumbar, lumbar, region of the lower back between the ribs and the pelvis, loin. Mammary, mammary, breast. Mental, mental, chin. Nasal, nasal, nose. Occipital, occipital, inferior posterior region of the head. Oral, oral, mouth. Orbital, orbital, eye cavity. Otic, otiac, ear. Palmar, palmar, palm of the hand. Patellar, patellar, anterior part of the knee. Pectoral, pectoral, anterior chest. Pedal, pedal, foot. Pelvic, pelvic, pelvis. Perineal, perineal, the inferior most region of the trunk between the thighs and the buttocks, perineum. Plantar, plantar, sole of the foot. Popliteal, popliteal, area posterior to the knee. Sacral, sacral, posterior region between the hip bones. Sternal, sternal, middle of the thorax, anteriorly. Sural, sural, calf of the leg. Tarsal, tarsal, ankle. Umbilical, umbilical, navel. Vertebral, vertebral, spinal column. Page 33. Practice 1.8. Describe the anatomical position. Answer. Start revealed content. A person in anatomical position is standing up straight, facing forward, has upper limbs at the sides, and the palms are facing forward. Revealed content has ended. Using the appropriate terms, describe the relative positions of several body parts. Answer. Start revealed content. The head is superior to the neck. The foot is inferior to the knee. The toes are anterior to the heel. The brain is posterior to the nose. The great toe is medial to the smallest toe. The thumb is lateral to the smallest finger. The kidneys are bilateral. The left kidney and the spleen are ipsilateral. The left kidney and the right kidney are contralateral. The knee is proximal to the foot. The knee is distal to the thigh. The skin is superficial to the subcutaneous layer. The lens of the eye is deep to the cornea. Revealed content has ended. Describe 3 types of body sections. Answer. Start revealed content. A sagittal section divides the body into left and right portions. If the portions are equal, it is called a median or mid-sagittal plane. If the portions are unequal, it is called a parasagittal plane. A transverse or horizontal plane divides the body into top and bottom portions. A frontal or coronal section divides the body into front and back portions. Revealed content has ended. Describe the 9 regions of the abdomen. Answer. Start revealed content. The epigastric region is the upper middle part of the abdominal area. The left and right hypochondriac regions lie on both sides of the epigastric region. The umbilical region is in the central part of the abdominal area. The left and right lateral, lumbar, regions lies on both sides of the umbilical region. The pubic, hypogastric, region occupies the lower middle part of the abdominal region. The left and right inguinal, iliac, regions lie along both sides of the pubic region. Revealed content has ended. Explain how the names of the abdominal quadrants describe their locations. Answer. Start revealed content. The umbilicus is the reference point for the abdominal quadrants. Above the umbilicus is termed upper, and below is termed lower. The sides are named anatomically as left or right. Revealed content has ended. Some medical and applied sciences. Table 1.4 provides some of the most commonly encountered medical and applied sciences terms. Page 34. Page 35. Assess. Chapter assessments. 1.1 Origins of medical science.